Every time you visit a doctor, a story gets written. It's a story about your symptoms, what the doctor finds, the diagnosis, the treatment. But for the entire healthcare system to actually work, that very personal story has to be translated into a universal language. And that language is a series of codes. The people who do that translating, they're basically medical detectives.
So how on earth does all the complexity of a patient's situation, all those details, get boiled down into one single universal code? That's the big mystery we're going to solve today. We're going to put on our detective hats, learn the methods, follow the clues, and crack a couple of cases of our own.
Every great detective needs a rule book, right? A guide to all the laws and procedures. While for medical coders, this is it. The official name is the International Classification of Diseases, 10th Revision Clinical Modification. Yeah, it's a mouthful. So pretty much everyone just calls it the ICD-10-CM. This book is where you'll find every rule, every convention, every clue you need to translate that patient story perfectly.
Now, this book is massive. You don't just sit down and read it like a novel. A good detective knows exactly which tools to pull out of their toolkit for the job. And to solve these coding mysteries, we're going to focus on two absolutely essential sections of this rulebook.
Okay, think of it this way. The alphabetic index is where you start your investigation. It's your list of leads, all organized by the condition or diagnosis. But, and this is so important, you never ever just take a code from the index and call it a day. You always take that potential code to the tabular list. That's the book of laws. It's where you verify your clue, read all the fine print, and make absolutely sure it's the right code for your case. And to make sure no clue is ever missed, there's an official procedure. It's a systematic method that ensures every single coder, every detective, is following the evidence in the same way to find the most specific and accurate code possible. This is the heart of good detective work. Now, the official guide has 10 whole steps, but they really boil down to this 4-part investigation. First, you identify your main suspect, the main term in the diagnosis. Second, you hunt it down in the alphabetic index. Third, you follow all the notes and cross-references. Think of these as your secondary clues. And finally, the most critical step of all, you verify everything in the tabular list. I'm going to say it a lot. Always verify. All right, enough theory. Let's get our hands dirty and put these new detective skills to the test. We'll start with a really common, straightforward case, just to see how the method works in the real world.
So here it is, our first case file. The doctor's report is short and sweet, acute bronchitis. Seems pretty simple, right? But as we're about to see, in the world of coding, every single word matters.
Okay, step 1, identify the main term. In this case, it's pretty clearly bronchitis. So for step 2, we crack open our alphabetic index and we start looking for that term. This is always where the trail begins. Now we're following the clues. Underneath the main term bronchitis, you'll find a bunch of subterms that give more detail. We're looking for that modifier, acute. And right there, the trail leads us straight to a potential code J stands 20.9. But remember, our investigation is not over yet. And here it is, that final crucial step. We take our potential code J20.9 and we look it up in the tabular list. We read the full description, we check for any extra notes, and it's a perfect match. The story of acute bronchitis has been officially translated. Case closed. Okay, that was a good warm-up, but now let's tackle something a bit more complex. This case is going to require a much deeper investigation and a really sharp eye for those small but absolutely critical details. And here is our next case file. Whoa, look at all the details here. Emergency encounter, non-displaced, bimalleolar, right leg. In our investigation, every single one of those words is a critical clue. We can't ignore any of them. No matter how complicated a case looks, our method doesn't change. We start in the same place, the alphabetic index, and we locate the main term. For an injury like this, our main term is fracture. Okay, from fracture, we start following the trail of breadcrumbs, the subterms. The doctor's note said the ankle and that it's a bimalleolar fracture on the right side. So we follow that path in the index, and it leads us to code S82.841 with a dash at the end. So what's the deal with that dash? In the world of medical coding, that little dash is a huge clue. It's basically the book screaming at you, hey, stop, you're not done yet. It means the code is incomplete. The story isn't finished.
We're missing a final, critical piece of the puzzle. And that missing piece is the seventh character. For a ton of codes, especially for injuries, this last character is mandatory. It tells a crucial part of the story, why the patient is there. An A is for the initial encounter, the first time the patient is being seen for that problem. A D is for a subsequent encounter, like a follow-up visit to check on how things are healing. Now, if we look back at our case file, it specifically said emergency encounter. Well, that's pretty much the definition of an initial treatment, right? So we add our final clue, the seventh character, A, to complete the code. The final precise translation for this whole complicated injury is S82.841A. And now, case closed. Okay, now that we've solved a couple of cases, let's dig into some of the golden rules. This is the fine print, the special conventions that every good detective absolutely has to know to avoid misinterpreting the evidence. You're going to see these two abbreviations, NEC and NOS, all over the place. Here's an easy way to remember the difference. You use NEC, not elsewhere classifiable, when the doctor's notes are actually more specific than the codes in the book. The doctor's documentation is just too detailed. On the flip side, you use NOS, not otherwise specified, when the doctor's notes are too vague and you're forced to use a more general, unspecified code. The tabular list also has these excludes notes, and they are critical instructions. The easiest way to think about them is with road signs. An excludes one note is a hard stop sign. It means the two conditions listed can never, ever be coded together, period. Excludes two, on the other hand, is like a yield sign. It's just telling you that a certain condition isn't included here, but it's not a contradiction. If the patient has both, it's totally okay to add a second code to tell the whole story. So let's just quickly recap what our detective work has turned up today. First, medical coding is all about translating a patient's unique story into a universal language. The golden rule? You always start in the alphabetic index, but you must end with verification in the tabular list. And finally, the little details matter a lot. Paying attention to all those notes, placeholders, and conventions is what makes the difference. It really is detective work. Behind every single one of those alphanumeric codes, there's a human story. A story of a diagnosis, an injury, of care. And all those little stories, when put together, create the data that drives medical research and public health. So the question is, now that you know the basics of how to read the clues, what story will you uncover next?